Hello, my dear listeners. Again, this is Cynthia Concordia from Dream to Rise, and I'm so grateful and honored to have one special guest who has 16 years of experience with nutrition counseling, and wherein she specializes. Wow, what's happening? Specializes in intuitive eating. So last 2017, she began working with clients who had eating disorders after she realized that she had her own issues with food and body, including chronic dieting, emotional eating, feeling guilty, and out of control around food. She started uh, helping other people change their lives and be able to exist and have food freedom. And now she helps people, especially those who are struggling with eating disorders, on how to improve their relationship with food and body without restriction or fighting with the scale. And without further ado, let's welcome Jenna Talleda. Hello, Jenna. Welcome to our Dream to Rise podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really amazing to be able to chat with you.
Same here. I'm really fortunate to have you because the topic that you'll be discussing is really very, for sure, a lot of people will be able to get something out of the sharing that you will be, or the insights you'll be sharing with us. So let's get started.
Yes,
So
thank you. Yes.
okay, I would just like to ask about your story. If you could share your story, and then what were uh, how were you able to overcome your biggest obstacle, and then now you're doing what you're doing?
Right. Yes.
Uh-huh.
So, um, so it- well, I guess the biggest thing that I was trying to deal with at the time was that I was going through this really rough time in my marriage, um, and I found out that my ex-husband was cheating on me.
Oh.
And when I caught him about when I talked to him about it, he decided that instead of taking responsibility for his choices, he was going to blame it on me. And so what he ended up saying was that he it was okay because I was fat. And it was something that really crushed me, you know? It really hit me to the core because before that I had been, you know, my it seemed like it was just like what most people experience is just like concerns with like body image and stuff like that, but it wasn't like it didn't feel like it was anything so serious that I needed treatment for. It was just like, when somebody calls you fat, you just don't like it. And but this one, it really hit me to my core. And to put the whole responsibility onto me and my body, something that I didn't feel
But
like I could control.
yeah, may I ask you, how long have you been married?
We were married for like about 8 years at that point, 7, 8 years, and then but we were together for 12 years.
But were
So
you
total.
in that condition before marriage?
Yeah,
It was this.
yeah.
Oh, and then.
That was just, and it didn't seem to be a problem before
Uh-huh,
this.
uh-huh.
So but yeah, so it was very heartbreaking. And so uh I ended up like starting to punish myself for it. And I put myself on this crazy restriction. It was so crazy that I couldn't even explain it to other people. But it was a takeoff of low carb, but I pretty much made it no carb. And and I had to make everything from scratch at home. I couldn't eat at any restaurants. I couldn't go to other people's houses to eat there. I was constantly obsessed with food all the time and things like that. But I thought that unless I got skinnier, that I wasn't going to find a partner who was going to care about me, or that I wasn't going to be successful with my job. And so I felt like I needed to do this to make this better. So anyway, so I was doing this for a while, and I was even getting to the point where I was pushing myself too hard with the with exercising as well. Going to the gym is not really my idea of like how I like to move my body. Um, but there was the elliptical there that was kind of the one that I could tolerate. You
Mhm.
know, it was something I could stay on. But what I ended up doing in my brain was that I ended up pushing myself to the unsafe heart levels. And I felt that if I didn't work out at that unsafe heart level, then any time that I was spending on that elliptical was worthless, you know? But afterwards, I would always feel exhausted, or I ended up getting burnt out. And I would even, some days I would drive up to the gym, sit in my car, and just stare at it. And I couldn't get myself to go in there because I had made this like such torture for myself.
Mhm.
And and it got to a point like where I was eventually able to like change my body size. But the thing was is that it didn't really answer the problems that I thought it was going to solve. And it ended up bringing a lot more problems with it because I was still like so nervous that I hadn't lost enough, and I was worried the weight would come back on. I was constantly obsessed with food. The only time that I felt good about myself was if I might have catched a glimpse of myself in the mirror, or somebody would have commented on my body. And that was very fleeting, you know, like it would only last, that good feeling would last for maybe like 5 minutes or something. And then I was back to thinking it wasn't enough. And one of my friends had told me that I didn't look well. And but I looked at that, I was so confused because according to the body mass index scale, I was still considered overweight. And so I wasn't in the place that I was in the healthy weight zone yet. How
Mhm.
could he tell me that I didn't look good yet because I was still, or that I was looking too much, like I had lost too much. It just didn't make any sense to me. Now looking back, I'm sorry, thank you. Now looking back, I can I can see that I wasn't looking very well. And so um I ended up going like doing this path and everything for a while until it got to be around my birthday. And that was also Thanksgiving. And and I made all of the food according to what my restriction was. And some of it turned out good, but some of it did not turn out very good. It was like my birthday cake. It didn't deserve to be called a birthday cake. It was disgusting. It was like, yeah, it was so nasty. It was like,
Because you're
I
trying
was,
to restrict some ingredients.
yes, exactly. I
Uh-huh.
was trying because I didn't let myself have any carbohydrates. So I was trying to use almond flour as as
The flour,
the
yeah.
base of the cake. It didn't set up the same way. It is not the same as wheat flour. And
Okay.
so it was like this goo. Even though I baked it in the oven and everything like that, it was just nasty and gross. And you know, my birthday and my birthday cake, those are things I really look forward to. And but it was like that breaking point for me because I was like, I really want my birthday cake. So but I forced myself to eat that stuff and it was so gross. But I
Because you don't want to throw it away.
exactly. You don't want to throw it away. I mean,
And
that was
waste.
how I was going to celebrate my birthday, was eating this nasty ass thing, and it was so gross. So I just
And
so
you
anyways,
were by yourself during that time?
no, I was having I made Thanksgiving dinner for my parents and myself.
Ah, okay.
And they were kind enough to eat it with me. But um so at that point I was just like, okay, I'm gonna give myself the holidays to enjoy. And then come January, I'm gonna come back and start this plan back up again. And well, January came and went, and I was like, I'm not going to torture myself anymore. This is just too much. It was so hard to uh to hold myself to that restriction all the time. And once I was able to like enjoy some of my favorite things, it was just like, how can I give that stuff up? Plus, there's this period of time that you go through where when you're transitioning from eating normally to having no carbohydrates, where your body just feels awful. It feels like low energy. It feels like you're crabby, that you have a headache, you're just obsessed with food the whole time. And it's not a very fun period of time. It takes about a week to get through that. And I didn't want to put myself through that. It was not fun. So I couldn't bring myself to make that happen again. So I kind of just let myself be loosey goosey. I was still kind of restricting in a lighter way. Like there were still some different foods and things like that that I wouldn't let myself have, but I wasn't as stringent as I was before. So then down the road, I maybe later that year, I ended up getting a job at the drug rehab center. And I figured out that the people there, when they were coming off their drugs or alcohol, that they resorted to a lot of eating disorder behaviors. Some of them were diagnosed with eating disorders, some of them just had disordered eating habits, where they wouldn't let themselves, like, if it usually branched in two different ways. One was that they would say, oh, I have to do everything perfect with my eating. Everything has to be quote unquote healthy. So they completely took things out of what they were doing with their food, like completely went on the opposite end of the spectrum. And then there were the other folks who might have numbed and things like that with their food. And at that time, I didn't really have a lot of experience helping people with eating disorders. I had worked in different areas of dietetics, but not necessarily that. And um, so I did some research to find out how I could best support them. And I found out that intuitive eating is a really successful approach with people with eating disorders. So I started reading the book. It's written by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. And mind you, while I was reading this book, the intention was to help my clients and figure out ways of helping them. But as I'm reading this book, it like I realized that they wrote the book about me. Like everything that they were saying in there, those were things that I was struggling with. I was struggling with guilt around food, feeling out of control, trying to fight with the scale, feeling bad in my body, never feeling good enough, all of the different kinds of things. But it was a completely different way of thinking about food and body than what I had been taught. Um, it was so different. And so, but it made sense. Like it finally, everything lined up of why those things don't work, you know? And so it was just this crazy aha moment that I realized that this is really what I'm supposed to be doing, not only just for myself, but that I'm supposed to be bringing this to other people as well, because I know that a lot of other people struggle with these issues as well. And we don't have to struggle with them. Even though it's so normalized in our world that we have to be worried about our food, or that we have to make sure we don't eat too much of something, or that we don't have this or that because of certain fear mongering that happens, we don't have to live like that. We can have food and body freedom. And I wanted to be able to bring that to people and share that. So so it really opened things up for me in a whole nother way. And shortly after I finished the book, I went and became certified in it. I got to work directly with the authors, which is really amazing. Um, and and then I went and I worked on my own relationship with food. I worked with other dietitians who specialize in this area, and they really helped me turn my thinking around and how I approach food. So now I'm using that experience and that recovery to be able to support other people. And they may or may not have a diagnosed eating disorder, but it's it's really more for just not feeling like we have to be stuck in all of that noise, and that we have to listen to all of that to be happy or healthy, because we can be healthy by ourselves, like with just by listening to what our own body needs are, not everybody else's.
Yes, exactly.
So
And then what did you do? What tools did you use to overcome this? Because actually, I could sense that your main problem is about the mindset, that I don't
yes.
good enough, I'm a failure, I don't know, and so on. Um, was it the book that helped you change your mindset, or the doctors in the rehab center, or how did you overcome or change this fixed mindset to a growth mindset?
um Well, it wasn't the doctors at the facility. They didn't really realize this kind of stuff. Their specialty was more in drug rehabilitation and things like that. They didn't really recognize the food part of things. That's why I was hired to deal with that kind of stuff with the clients. Um, but I think it was really more of the book that
The
helped. It really shifted my perspective of how to think about food and body. And I also I was working with an amazing therapist at the time, who really helped show me self-compassion, and she helped me work on my perfectionism, and uh, just dealing and processing with all of the trauma that I had been through at that time. And so I had her. She was the one who kind of talked to me about intuitive eating in the first place, and then I went and read that book afterwards. Um, but yeah, and then I also worked with the other dietitians who specialize in this, and they were able to help because I had so much messaging in my brain over the past few decades that it was like cemented in there of how I was supposed to think about food and body. And they were able to help me reframe that so it was in a more supportive type of way.
uh-huh. Oh, that's great. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, how long did it take you to really, because like me, I shared my story, it took me 6 years before I was able
Yes,
to rise up.
exactly.
Yeah. So it took you
It's so
years
true.
as
And
well.
it did. And I know that we kind of live in this world where everybody wants instant gratification, and we
Mhm.
wish we could just snap our fingers and it be completely different. And at that time, I kind of probably felt the same way too.
Yeah.
Um, but really, what something I've learned about that is it's not necessarily about the destination, it's about the journey that it took to get there. because if I didn't have that journey, I wouldn't have had those lessons. I wouldn't have had those moments of being able to reframe that. If I just snapped my fingers and all of a sudden I was healed, I wouldn't have been able to help other people with what I've learned. So even though I'm in a completely different place than I was 7 years ago, um, I uh, it was it was still an important journey, and I'm still technically learning things. You know, I'm far enough along where I feel very confident in my subject matter, but I'm still learning, and I still have moments. That's another thing that tends to happen is that we can have these surprise things that kind of show up that you might not even realize. And how do we deal with those stressors? How do we deal with those unexpected triggers? And the only way to do that is by going through that experience and being able to experiment and be curious about it and practice.
Exactly.
So,
And I agree
one
with
of the,
you.
yeah,
I agree
go
with
ahead, I'm
you
listening.
in terms of the, because a lot of people, especially if they want to lose weight, they want the immediate gratification. They want to immediately lose 100 pounds or whatever, or 10, 20 pounds. So what they do is they use different like slimming pills and so on, no? And
Yeah,
uh, so you would not recommend all those things. It's more on how you control your food intake and so on. Because I don't know if those slimming pills and whatever will it, I think it would be temporary only, no? It will not
yeah,
last for a long term.
it's true. Those kinds of things definitely don't have any long-term results. But the interesting thing too is that, and people might yell at the yell at the computer or the phone that they're listening to right now, when I say this. But when we talk about like any sort of trying to restrict or trying to fight with the scale, there's a in most cases the weight usually comes back or brings more with it within 2 to 5 years. It's actually been studied. Most of these different things that they say they have research to support, these weight loss efforts, in most cases, those studies only look at people for less than 1 year. And the ones that actually did look at them for longer, within 2 to 5 years, most of those people regained the weight or ended up gaining more as a result.
oh, really?
And
Oh
so,
my.
yeah,
So
yes.
what would you suggest?
So, so the fact of the matter is that, um, I know that there's so much pressure on us to focus on the scale. There's so much pressure on us to take up less space in this world because we live in a society that idolizes a certain body type. And
Exactly.
then we're told at the doctor's office that we have to be a certain size in order to be healthier. But there's actually a lot of sketchy history of how those numbers came to be. And uh, there's a lot of racist roots to them and a lot of misogynistic roots to them. For starters, the person who came up with the initial BMI tables,
Mhm.
the height and weight tables, he was a white European male, in the late 1800s, and he wasn't in the health field at all. He was actually a mathematician,
Mhm.
and he just liked playing with numbers and categorizing things based off those numbers. So BMI was never intended to actually look at individual people and decide what their health was. It was actually just to group them together. And the data that he took for those numbers or for those tables, um, he only measured other white European males like himself. He never measured women. He never measured
Oh,
people from other countries or other cultures or other races. Nothing. He just measured other white European males.
Mhm.
And then fast forward about 50 years or so, then the life insurance companies decided to make up their own height and weight tables. And their thing was that the people who crossed this arbitrary line were at risk for dying sooner. And the problem with that was first, it was based off their own cherry picked clientele. And second of all, it wasn't based off the research that was happening at the time. And if they could draw this arbitrary line in the sand, that meant that they could charge people past that line more money or deny them care altogether. And the research that was happening, it was by the National Institutes of Health.
Mhm.
They looked at 600,000 men and women, all different qualities that could have potentially affected their life. And um, and they actually found out that those life insurance tables were as much as 50 pounds off. And that the person who was at the highest risk for dying sooner was actually in the BMI category 17 to 21, which would have been underweight to midway of normal weight. And the person who was in the overweight category, they had the lowest risk of dying sooner.
No?
Um, yeah, exactly.
Oh my.
Exactly. It's so, and the diet industry and the medical community are very closely enmeshed with each other. And so they have a lot to gain monetarily when we try to focus on people's insecurities about their sizes. It's like a 70 to 80 billion dollar industry that grows every year. And they are out to have, just like any other business, they like repeat clients. And they want people, they create whatever sort of regimen it is, whatever sort of eating plan or exercise routine or whatever it might be. And the people do it, it doesn't work for one reason or another, and then the people blame themselves, and then they come back and say, please help me, I regained that weight back. But it's not actually the person's fault. It's because of the way these things are designed. And um and our bodies, when we try to do these things, they don't recognize that what we're doing is intentional. They think that it's a famine that we're going through, you know? So they'll do different things to help keep us safe and surviving.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they'll do is they'll make it harder to lose. So as a plateau or each consecutive attempt to lose, they'll make it harder and harder with each try. They want to make sure that you eat, so it'll cause stronger hunger cues, cravings, obsessive thoughts about food. And then on the other side, it'll make it easier to put weight on to protect you from future famines.
Uh-huh.
So, um, so the fact is that the reason why when we try to lose weight, that's why the weight ends up coming back and bringing more with it. It's not that we're doing anything wrong, it's that our bodies are trying to survive.
Mm.
So when we can kind of recognize that now, there's even with that history and science and all of that, there can still be that desire because we think that being in a smaller body means that we're worthy or that we're healthy. So there's usually deeper things that are going on there. And that's what I tackle with my people, my clients. So we can sit there and recognize that it's okay to take up space. It's okay. You are worthy just as you are. You can eat. You have permission to eat because you exist. Um, you are worthy because you exist. It's
Mhm.
not because you have to be smaller in order to do that.
So,
So,
so in your program,
yeah.
you help them in terms of changing their mindset, at the same time coming up with dishes or what do you call this, or food preparation in term on what they're supposed to eat? Is that included in the program? So that they
Well,
would
that would
lose
be a
weight as
diet.
well?
Well, this isn't a focus on weight loss. This is
Uh-huh.
a focus on um, being comfortable with your body as it is. And I know that that can be a very big hurdle for people to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, given what I was just talking about with the reason why the weight comes back and brings more with it, it kind of creates that constant fight and battle. And so this is a way of being able to break that battle and stop it in its tracks. And so if we take weight off the table and we just focus on listening to what our bodies are saying, focus on reclaiming who we are and what our needs are, it makes it different. And our body size might end up changing. It depends for each individual person, but there's no promises because it's not a focus on that weight change. And we do talk about maybe some different meal ideas and snacks and things like that, but it's not about rules. It's not about you have to eat this specific way at this specific time in at this specific amount, because that actually kind of goes against people's own inner wisdom of how to feed themselves.
Okay.
Yes, it is important to make sure we're eating consistently and that we're getting a good variety of things, et cetera, et cetera. But to sit there and try to push people into eating a very specific type of way, it actually makes them rebel.
Uh-huh.
And it makes, I could dive into something else. I know we don't have a lot of time,
Mhm.
but there's a cycle that we fall into called a restriction binge cycle. And and if we sit there and tell somebody how to eat, that restrict binge cycle just keeps going and it's just this
Mhm.
vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's
So
just rebelling, yeah, as what you've mentioned. Okay.
exactly.
So have you helped survivors now? Have from your clients, how are you able to monitor them now? Because yes, they have
Yes.
gone through the program. How are you able to monitor the results in terms of, oh,
Yeah.
they have they were able to um change their mindset and they are now they love themselves, and so how are you able to monitor the 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 results of the or the improvement which they have gone through?
Sure, definitely. Well, like we talked about earlier, it definitely is a process. It's not a snap of the fingers.
Yes.
It's so what one thing that I've created is this monthly membership that I have.
Mhm.
And we talk every week. Um and we have that support system in place. We have a resource library of different studies that support this information that they can share with their doctor, uh, and so it's a way of being able to stay together during that time, rather than giving them the information and saying off you go, because that's not how this works.
Mhm.
It's not a matter of
Exactly.
just knowledge. It's a
Yes.
matter of being able to practice it
Apply what you've
and
learned. Yes.
apply and be curious about it. And if it doesn't go quite as you had anticipated, to not sit in shame,
Yeah.
but
Try
instead to
another way. Try another way.
to
Yes.
yeah to well to not necessarily try another way, but also to just give yourself an opportunity to keep practicing, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy to set boundaries with people. It's not easy to fight off diet culture because it's all around us all the time, you know. So I mean, we're constantly having the pressure to take up less space.
Oh.
So I can't even have a simple conversation with somebody without them knowing who I am. They just think I'm just a person, and all of a sudden the conversation will turn to food and body. and they don't know who I am. I don't talk about that stuff necessarily unless they bring it up. I had somebody come to my house, they were fixing something, and they were talking to me about how they were going to get married. And then all of
Mhm.
a sudden it got into the conversation about how they had weight loss or they were working on their weight loss or whatever. And so it's like it's around us all the time, even when we're not even intending to talk about it. There was something else. I was in a group where we were talking about money mindset. And even in a money mindset, it was supposed to be about finances. It was
Mhm.
supposed to be about like, you know, approaching our money in a different type of way. But instead, what ended up, the conversation ended up talking about our weight and our food. And it's like, okay, well, food is part of the budget, but come on, people, we don't have to sit there about weight loss all the time, you know? So,
See, I
uh,
told you that's always the problem of all.
exactly. It's always forefront. And
Always
even
in
on
their
TV,
mind. Yes.
yes, even on TV, you sit and you want to watch a silly TV show. Um, I've been watching TV with like a different kind of thought process, like looking for these different kinds of things. And I watched one show, like the George Lopez show, for example. He
Ah,
had just come out with a show last year. And in one episode, a 20-minute episode, there were three fat jokes made. And one of them was made by a child.
oh,
And so when you're sitting in a bigger body and you're the butt of the joke three times in 20 minutes, it's a really hard world to live in, you know? And
that
so it's
sometimes
understandable.
sometimes I just stop watching TV.
It's true. It's
And
true.
even social media,
But
because
it's
you tend to compare yourself. And
it's
that's
so
the
true.
thing. Yes. You don't have to compare yourself. And I'm sure they've gone through so much. They have the liposuction, they have all the money that they could use to do and transform their body. But then it's about
And
our mindset when we think that I am a lovable person. I am a person with a special talent, with a special gift, wherein I could be of help to other people. Probably
right.
when you find positivity, when you focus on the positive, that you love yourself, that tendency is you take care of yourself as well. And
Exactly.
uh,
It's a lot harder to take care of yourself when you're coming from a place of hate.
exactly.
Um, yeah. And so when you can come from a place of, and when you can come from a place of appreciating your body instead of saying this body is awful and it doesn't cooperate the way I want it to, and you're just sitting there and punishing it and fighting with it, it's really hard.
Mhm.
But and those folks that we sit there and easily compare ourselves to, we also have to realize that their lives might not be all great and wonderful as what we
Exactly.
think they are. And it doesn't mean that because they're in a certain size body that that's why that happened.
Uh-huh.
um they could actually have an eating disorder and we don't even know it.
Yes.
um they they could have a lot of health issues and we don't even know it.
Mhm.
um and so the fact of the matter is that they might portray a certain type of character on TV or on social media, but it doesn't mean that
That they're
your
happy
way,
within themselves.
yeah, it doesn't at all.
Uh-huh.
Um, and
Because of the pressure that they see. That's
exactly, and it doesn't minimize the way that we live. It doesn't minimize how like what we're doing. It's not saying that what we're doing is not worthy or not acceptable or that it's wrong in any sort of way. We all come in different shapes, sizes, and shades,
Mhm.
and we're not all meant to look alike.
Yes.
So because
That's
if we did, this place would be so boring.
Mhm.
It would be so boring.
And that's the main thing, the main lesson that I'm getting from you. I don't know. Now I'm getting the lesson. I have to ask you also what's your the lesson, what you've learned throughout the journey. From what I've learned from this interview is learn to love yourself. Learn to appreciate what you have. And once you appreciate and be grateful for what you have and live at the moment, you'll be able to appreciate what's coming next. Because when you appreciate your body, when you appreciate yourself, the more you get motivated that, hey, I have this yearning to be of service to others. So when I am of service to others, I will work on myself more because I have
It's true.
something to do. I have a purpose and they need me.
It's so true. And, and one thing I might add to that is that, again, it's not like a light switch. We can't really just say, oh, I'm going to start loving myself now.
Yes.
Because if you come from this place of hate for so long, it's so easy to kind of continue that path. And it can feel like this really huge hurdle to cross over to get to a place of actually accepting your body as it is. So I'm not asking people to love their body right now. I'm asking you to figure out how you can hate your body a little bit less without trying to take up less space. Because you are worthy just as you are right now. And you can get to a place where you can feel good in your body and about your body without having to be smaller. It doesn't mean that, if your body does end up getting smaller, that that's a bad thing or that I'm trying to get people to be in bigger bodies or whatever. I'm just trying to help people recognize that we are able to be present just as we are. We don't have to be smaller in order to be healthier or to be worthy. Because there's other people that I've worked with in the past that were in smaller bodies and they weren't in a place where they were healthy. They were dealing with a number of different issues.
Mhm.
And a lot of smaller body people get a lot of those conditions that are blamed on fatness, like diabetes or cholesterol or all of those things where the doctors tell us that we need to lose weight in order to make that better. Guess what? What about the people in the small bodies with the same problems? You know? So,
So are bulimics
so
also the bulimics,
let's, yeah,
those
what about that?
it's all, again in the mental health thing. It's about
Yeah,
what
that
they
is,
think about themselves. See? So they try to starve
that's,
themselves and then that happens.
yeah,
It's all
yeah, that
really in the
is,
state of mind, no?
yeah, yeah, bulimia is definitely a type of eating disorder. There's a number of different eating disorders out there. I personally dealt with orthorexia, which is like healthy eating to the millionth degree. And um, there's a number of different things, but it really does come to this place of how we think about our food and body. And
Mhm.
it's more than just people with a diagnosed eating disorder that are struggling with this. So you don't have to be diagnosed with bulimia or anorexia or orthorexia or any of those other types. Even if you're sitting there and you're fighting with the scale all the time, or you're feeling scared about eating, or you feel like you're never hungry, or that you find yourself feeling starving later in the evening because you didn't eat all day, and then you feel guilty and out of control. That's disordered eating practices and really can hurt your relationship with food and body.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah,
So
so that's,
great information which I've gathered from you right now. So
thank you.
what do you think is your goal for the next 12 months?
So my goal is to continue bringing this message to people. I would like to be able to grow this group that I have the permission to exist. and to be able to support people on their journeys with this. And another one is that I want to I want to start bringing this conversation to doctors, because doctors do get in this mindset that it's all about the BMI or it's all about the scale, and they kind of can lose sight of the person, and they can make assumptions about the person, and I want to be able to bring this to light to show them that this kind of thinking actually causes more problems than it helps. So my goal is to start bringing this conversation out into that medical community, as well as supporting the
Yes, this is great. So what do you
clients.
think would be your major roadblock in achieving this goal about starting conversation with doctors? Major roadblock.
Oh, so like I said, diet culture and the medical community are very heavily intertwined with each other, and there's a lot of money in there. And doctors do have a way of, they can kind of have an all or nothing mindset when it comes to this. And it's very hard when they've been drilled into their head that weight bigger bodies are bad or unhealthy, or it's their job to try to make them smaller. Can be really hard to be able to talk about it from a different perspective. So um, so that's, it's gonna have to take some, I don't know, some way of being able to connect with them, that they'll be able to be willing to listen to this kind of information. Because I have a feeling a lot of people are gonna probably shut this out and think that I have two heads. But
Why do you think
I do
that?
have.
Why do you think that they will just close themselves? Close this idea because of
Because
what they're used to doing, trying to,
yes,
because health
because
is losing weight for them.
exactly, and
But it
like
it it
they
it
get a lot of pressure from the insurance companies and from the pharmaceutical companies. They get all of these studies that talk about how being in a bigger body is a bad thing, and so, except I have research that talks about it in a different kind of way. And I don't know how well they would be open to that, because they've been so used to, this is a bad thing and I have to fix it. And so
but
if I sit there and tell them maybe it's not such a bad thing,
uh-huh.
or maybe if we can shift gears, maybe if we can talk about things that we can try to, like different uh, ways to help people feel good in their bodies without focusing on the scale. I'm not sure, because even when I talk to the general public, I do get a lot of resistance with that. So I can only imagine that coming to a doctor and trying to talk about this, they would probably have even more. So
Because I
so
know
yeah,
now
that's
I've discovered now in my medical insurance, in the network, they have included now alternative medicines, acupuncture.
yes,
So instead of me going to the doctor directly, I go first to the acupuncturist to
nice.
instead
Oh,
of
that's
taking
awesome.
medication. Yeah. So probably it's how you are able to convince them, you know?
Right.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And
So I think
and determining,
that's also a mindset for you.
I think so too. I think so too. So yeah, and the fact that something I've learned along this time is trying to convince people of this. If they're not in a place to be able to hear it, then they're not going to be able to hear it. They
Yes.
have to be in that right place in their journey to be able to be open to it. Like if I would have read about intuitive eating during that time that I was heavily restricting and all of that, I wouldn't have absorbed the information like I did. Because at that time, the diet was the answer to all of my prayers. And it was only until after I was done doing that that I was able to absorb something different, you know? So
Most of
that's
most of the time we have to really fall flat on the ground before we open our mind and realize that, oh, there's something better, right? And those
yeah,
the lessons learned now.
yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you so much. So you've given a lot of advices. So what
Yeah,
simple advice which you could give? I've heard a lot of advices, so one major advice.
yeah. Whenever you hear something about how you're supposed to eat or what your body's supposed to look like, I want you to put your critical thinking hat on and think about where that actually came from. What were the roots of where that recommendation came from? And if that's actually going to be supportive for you in the long run, like, are you going to sit there and be obsessive about food? Are you going to feel guilty and out of control with it? Because that's really not supportive. You might be in a smaller body, but that's no way of existing like that. And uh and so I just encourage you to like put your thinking caps on and not take those pieces of advice as at face value, because they might look good on the forefront, but they actually might not be
Yes.
really as helpful as you think.
Great advice, great advice. It's all about in our thoughts, no? Try to see what you think could be the long-term result rather than the temporary results that you will be getting. So how
Exactly.
can they be able to get to connect with you if they
Sure.
need your service?
So, uh, feel free to share my contact information in the show notes. But I am on Instagram. My profile name is your.nutrition.ally. Um, and I also am on Facebook as well under my name. And so you could definitely reach out to me in either one of those places.
Okay. So take note, listeners, get in touch with Jenna, Facebook. Just look for Jenna Talleda, and Instagram, Your Nutrition Ally. Thank you so much, Jenna. It was
Thank you
nice
so
chatting
much.
with you, and I wish you all the best. So,
Thank you so much. You as well.
it was such a pleasure chatting with you. I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from you. Thank you. And to all the listeners, till the next episode. Bye.